Good Thursday morning, everyone. It's April 24th, 2025, and I got breaking news to share with you all right now from the Storm Prediction Center as they have now issued a 30% severe weather risk over most of Iowa, southern Minnesota, and northern Missouri on Monday. Now, to start off the video, here's a look at the latest severe weather outlook from the Storm Prediction Center, and this is for Monday, April the 28th, 2025, and as you all can see here, there is a 30% risk here. I'm circling this in black so you all can see this clearly. This is the potential of a severe weather outbreak, including strong tornadoes, very, very large hail. We could see big time hail out of this, and the risk for damaging winds that could exceed 80 to 90 miles an hour, especially since kinematics are going to be quite strong. And then surrounding that, we have this 15% risk of severe weather stretching all the way from central Minnesota, most of Wisconsin, all the way down into Missouri, as well as Oklahoma and Kansas. And it's not lonely because we have a day 6 slight risk of severe weather issued from the Storm Prediction Center for Tuesday, April the 29th, all the way from northern Texas into southeastern Oklahoma, stretching into Missouri, as well as Illinois, all the way across southern Michigan, northern Ohio, and all of Indiana under this risk. So yes, we could be looking at a double threat here of severe weather, especially again on Monday. Now, with that being said, we're going to be looking at two global computer models for our precipitation type reflectivity forecast because there is some timing differences here as far as if it comes in the morning early on or in the afternoon for Monday, and how strong will those impacts be with any of the severe storms that do pop up in the afternoon of Monday. Okay, so I want you all to listen very closely here because we're going to try to break things down as simple as we can possible. So this is for Monday morning, April the 28th, 2025, and this is a look at the European model. And what we're seeing here is an area of low pressure on top of the state line here of North and South Dakota, intersecting with Minnesota as well. Latching off of that low pressure system is this warm front, and then we have a bent back occlusion back in here over Wyoming as well as Montana into the rest of the Dakotas, and that's where much of the colder air is going to be residing. Now, out ahead of this, we have a dry line that is going to be in position here across the high plains, especially from northern Texas into western Kansas, into parts of, say, Nebraska, into central and South Dakota. And so when we put this into motion, what we're going to end up seeing is these storms, which, by the way, these storms out here along the warm front are going to likely be elevated in nature. So that's going to pose a threat for some large hail and some gusty winds, most likely. No tornado threat with those since it's going to be overnight. It's going to be cold at the surface. So any storms that do try to develop will likely be elevated in nature. So by Monday afternoon here on the 28th of April, 2025, we got this area of low pressure that's going to be amplifying even more at 995 millibars. And of course, the European model does not show much convection here, and I'll explain why that is here when we get into our severe weather ingredients lab in just a little bit, okay? So stay tuned for that. To the north, we have showers and thunderstorms. Some of these could be severe, capable of producing significant hail, damaging wind gusts, perhaps over 60 to 80 miles an hour, and the risk for maybe an isolated tornado that could be quite strong, especially if it interacts with the triple point here where we have a dry line, we have cold front here, where we have a warm front that's kind of in position. We could have some big time tornadoes right here in southern Minnesota if things come together at the wrong time. So as we go into Monday afternoon, Monday evening, this is actually Monday evening into early Tuesday morning, storms eventually initiate because what we end up seeing is this dry line / cold front. They both kind of merge, they both collide, and we end up seeing storms initiating along that boundary. All right, so this would take us into overnight Monday into Tuesday. And so what we end up seeing early on Tuesday morning is pretty much nothing here. And some of you are like, well, David, the CP or SPC is saying there's a 15% risk for severe weather. Well, there's another model that will show us that, and that's the GFS. So this is through Tuesday morning next week, showing not much, although maybe a shower or a thunderstorm that could be severe over St. Louis, Missouri, Tuesday morning for your morning commute. That's the European. Let's take a look at the GFS model, because the GFS model has a much different solution here. And that's why we're using two models here for this video. Two of these models are getting involved. So on the GFS has a better defined warm sector. In other words, a 996 pressure here for Monday morning, a much more better warm front. It's going to be draped across here in central southern Minnesota, as well as Wisconsin. Again, any storms that initiate along and out ahead of this warm front will likely be elevated, posing only sub-severe hail and sub-severe wind damage, perhaps, with those storms. So no tornado concern there. Now, what does happen is we do get storms initiating down here in Missouri as well as Illinois. Some of those storms look more surface-based, and those would be the ones to be aware of that could produce tornadoes, more significant hail, and damaging winds, except this is Monday morning, so more likely the boundary will likely remain somewhat stable at the surface. So any convection, at least in the Monday morning time frame for your morning commute, would likely be elevated. But it is once we get into the afternoon, similar to the Euro, but now more initiation happens further south here on the GFS, is going to be Monday afternoon. The timing of this is pretty similar. So 21Z Monday, this is 21 or 0Z. So actually the GFS is slightly slower, which explains why the GFS is more aggressive with the storm initiation. It's all about the timing. That's what it all is right now. The slower this moves and it comes in on the wrong time in this case, we can get a lot of storms, and they're likely to be pretty severe. We have storms here initiating along the dry line and in the free warm sector in say Iowa as well as Kansas, in portions of southeastern Nebraska. Now up here, this is on the cold side, but don't be surprised if any storm initiates along this warm front or any type of boundary up here. We could see a significant tornado, something in the range of an EF1, maybe an EF2, maybe a high-end EF2 tornado. Cannot be ruled out of that up there, because that's where we have the best overlap of instability, moisture, and wind shear, that sort of thing. Okay, so let's go forward here. This is going to be for Monday afternoon, and we end up seeing more storms here. Now, these storms in Wisconsin, here in Iowa, are surface-based, and they will pose a threat for strong tornadoes. Some very big-time hail destruction. We could see hailstones 4 to 5 inches in diameter. I'm not surprised by that. And I'll show you why here in a second. And, of course, the risk for some damaging wind gusts exceeding greater than 80 miles an hour, especially since we have good kinematics out of this. And that moves off towards the east. Now, here it is. This is Tuesday afternoon. And yes, the GFS has a much more aggressive solution here with more significant showers and thunderstorms versus our European model. If we go back, yeah, that's the European model for Tuesday morning. This is the European or GFS model for Tuesday late morning, early afternoon. And yeah, you can see why. I think the GFS is onto something, and that's why the SPC has issued that slight risk and has been pretty confident in that for Tuesday's time frame. And we'll see if Tuesday also warrants a 30% in later outlooks. Now, with that out of the way, I want to show you all the instability, the shear, the moisture, the ingredients that are going to come together for a prolific severe weather event, even an outbreak that gets involved here in Iowa. So this is the 500 millibar height map, as well as the wind chart. This is a look at the jet stream at 18,000 feet. We have this trough that is going to be across the west. So in California and Nevada, this is going to be what's going to be the one that's going to cause the severe weather as this ejects into the northern plains. Yeah, we get cyclogenous out of this because we get height falls aloft, we get cooling temperatures, we also get surface pressure falls materializing, especially over western Nebraska into western South Dakota. And what you end up seeing is an air mass response, get southerly flow, pumping in that moisture off the Gulf. And you can see that here. So this is the GFS 15Z Monday, and this is 21Z. And yeah, that's a pretty prolific jet stream right there. That's pretty strong. We are at 70 to almost 80 knots at 18,000 feet over Iowa, over Minnesota, over, say, far eastern Nebraska. This is a jet streak. There's a lot of energy here that's getting involved and good ascent out ahead of this axis trough. That's going to be neutrally tilted, maybe some negative tilt to that. Now, in the low levels, this look at the 850 millibar wind map plot. And this is at about 5,000 feet above the surface. And yeah, you're looking at 50 to 60 knots here over Iowa, as well as northern Illinois, as well as Wisconsin. And this is going to be the reasoning behind the significant wind damage threat and the tornado threat, and pretty much all significant hazards, because we're going to have really steep lapse rates, as well as instability that gets involved. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But yeah, kinematics here, also good veering winds with height, at least in the lowest 1 kilometer. We'll see that here in a split second. Actually, I'll just show you that right now. Your surface winds more due south. So south winds here at the surface, we're looking at winds between about 20 to 30 knots or so. So that's about 22 to 28 miles an hour at the surface. Good pressure here at 995. And look at this warm sector, or not warm, warm sector right in here. It's a pretty good defined one. Dry line back in here. You got your cold front that's draped into Wyoming, northern Nebraska, as well as southern South Dakota. It's a pretty good setup here. And right out in this area where I've circled in here, that includes for you all in Iowa, we could very well have a significant, intense tornado, especially where winds are mostly backed, or if they try to get backed in the low levels, we could see some big problems. Now, looking at our lapse rates here in the mid-levels. Now, this is basically a temperature change with height, okay? So the steeper the lapse rates, the faster temperatures are cooling aloft. And when that overspreads a warm sector like this with moisture kind of scooting underneath, where we have dew points in the low to mid 60s, we end up seeing a lot of instability get released. And what we have here is Monday afternoon. Yeah, this is from the Euro. If you want to trust the Euro, actually, why am I even on the Euro? Who knows, right? This is the Euro GFS now for Monday, 18Z. Yeah, these lapse rates here in Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Missouri, down even to Oklahoma, pretty steep. 9 or 8 to almost 9 degrees Celsius per 1 kilometer. Just for reference, you don't see that very often. Typical lapse rates are about 6 to 7 degrees Celsius per 1 kilometer. This is very steep enough to yield some pretty good instability. And if we did look just solely at the European model, which we are here because we're going to use mixed layer cape, because that's a more accurate term here, because we're going to have a lot of wind energy to work with. We're not just going to have not much wind, so we're going to have to use the ML or mixed layer cape. And over Iowa, over Missouri, as well as over Kansas, 3,000 joules per kilogram. We're down here, southwestern Iowa, pushing close to 4,000. That is extreme instability overspreading this warm sector because of those dew points that are so high. If we just click on a sounding here out of southwestern Iowa really quickly, Yeah, that's a no-go. That's a no bueno. That's a big no-no. We got temperatures at 86 degrees, dew points in the mid to upper 60s here on the European model. There's not much of a cap involved here. That is some decent instability. And if we even have little capping inversion here, we could have explosive thunderstorm development. And on this analog, we're up to 3 to even 5 inches in diameter. That is pretty tremendous. If we get any supercell that can remain discrete, it would be a very big hail producer, especially here in central southern Iowa, where that warm sector, where we get the best backing of winds. We get veered winds in the low levels. We get hodographs that are tightly wound up. It's going to organize supercells pretty nicely for us. Now, what is going to be a big inhibitor here, depending on what model you look at, so if that's the GFS or the European model, is convective inhibition. So this is the amount of energy that takes, or that is taken into account to prevent upward motion in the atmosphere in the form of thunderstorms or updrafts. Thunderstorms can develop in elevated terms above the boundary layer. That's why we call that some of these elevated storms or high-based storms, because they're not using the surface boundary. So in this case, we are seeing pretty good capping for Monday morning, but that cap erodes. Now, how much this erodes will depend on a number of things: moisture advection, enough lift in the atmosphere, and how much surface heating can actually be allowed to breach the cap in the afternoon. And so that's going to be, there's a few things that get involved with this. But you can see right here, right in western Iowa, the cap is fairly weak. We're not seeing a whole lot of convective inhibition versus early on it's much stronger, but then surface heating, enough lift and ascent aloft, arrival of that trough will allow to the erosion of the cap in the afternoon. When we look at the GFS model, it is also, let's see, surface-based SIN, we'll have to actually use that. It is showing a complete erosion of the cap by Monday afternoon, and that's why the GFS is more aggressive here in Iowa for more widespread convection in the form of multiple supercells, perhaps. But of course, this is going to be hard to dial in this far out because we're using global models. We're not using our high-res models yet. All right. Wow, hopefully this doesn't end up being too long, but I'm afraid it is going to end up being a very long discussion. Now, one last thing here is on the dew point forecast. Yeah, dew points are very high here. We're talking mid to upper 60s to low to mid 60s. I'm sorry. I thought I was reading that wrong. Yeah, low to mid 60s, even some mid 60s up here in Iowa. And that's to start the period, and then they climb up into the mid to upper 60s by the afternoon. And again, that's why our instability is going to be very, very significant, because anytime you get steep lapse rates, you warm and moisten the boundary layer beneath it. That usually gets our instability much stronger than versus if our lapse rates were much less steep under or overhead or overspreading a more warm, moist sector. Our instability would not be as significant, if that makes sense. I know it's a lot to take in here. So that's going to be the concern here for Monday. And then, of course, for Tuesday, dew points will be high enough to support severe weather. Along to go with that, instability too is sufficient enough for significant severe weather perhaps on Tuesday, but looks like Monday right now looks to be the big one. This could go moderate. I think we'll have a moderate risk somewhere over here in central and western Iowa, especially right within that triple point area. Well, anyways, if you found this video really helpful, detailed, and informative, please consider, folks, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that like button, hit that bell notification icon, and also leave a comment below this video. Let me know what your thoughts are about the severe weather on Monday. Do you think it could go moderate? Do you think it'll stay enhanced? Please let me know in the comment section below this video, folks, because you guys are really, really awesome, and I do appreciate you guys tuning into these videos, especially the one that I'm doing this morning. I don't do these very often, but yeah, this is grabbing my attention pretty quickly. All right, but anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with you more soon with more weather updates on this severe weather outbreak, potentially on Monday and Tuesday.